Trust Your Struggle is a place of inspiration. We have these conversations with individuals about the monumental struggles that they've had in their life, what they've done to overcome them, how these struggles and what they've done have kind of helped define who they are today. The one and only Salvador Lee Bravo. He's a consumer insight designer on the innovation team within the healthcare industry. This is very rewarding for him because what they innovate will impact a bunch of lives. He quotes Bob Moesta that you should look to where people are struggling to do something, and that's going to give you the insight for your product or service. Early on, he grew up in the LBC, where you would find out how many degrees of separation you are from Snoop, and learning you should never live more than a few blocks away from the nearest taco stand. But his biggest struggle has been with what's going on in his head and how to try and master that. Enjoy as we get deep and philosophical on this episode.
Well, I'm Salvador Lee Bravo, 38 years old. Live in Phoenix, Arizona currently, and originally from Long Beach, California. Born and raised Southern California dude, trying to still figure out his way through the desert. And my family consists of my wife, Katie, who you know, our daughter, Billy, a pretty wild and mean German Shepherd, and a pretty lazy cat named Felix. So yeah, I'm just chilling here in Phoenix, living this stage of life out. I'm really enjoying it, considering everything that's going on in the world at the moment.
For
But
sure.
yeah, a little bit of who I am and my background.
Nice. And when did you move to Arizona? Or how old were you?
Dude, I didn't know I had to do math in this podcast. Shit, that's a good question. 2011. So I moved here in 2011. So I was about 29, maybe about to be 30. That was really interesting. I moved here because of a relationship that I was in at the time. The person I was seeing was living in Tucson. They were planning on moving to Phoenix, and I followed suit to join them. And a lot of change was happening in my life. I don't want to dig too much into that. Maybe we'll touch on that later in our conversation. But there was a spiritual transformation. I was going through a lot changing internally, a lot of struggle, hence the name of the podcast. But as with any change that's really big like that, really monumental in one's life, a lot of factors go into that, and a lot of things have made me change because of that mood. So Phoenix for me is a very clear delineation in terms of another chapter of my life, another segment in my life, and it really separates a big part of who I was and really is embodied kind of who I am today and who I think of myself today.
Yeah. And so what are you doing currently right now in your career?
So currently I'm working in a new role within a healthcare system here in Phoenix on an innovation team. I'm on the consumer insights part of that team and design thinking part of that team. And my role there really is to help this healthcare organization start paving the way of what the future of healthcare might be, trying to think of new and novel ways to deliver healthcare to our communities and to our states. But what intrigued me the most is I've done a lot of this type of work, and we'll dig into my career, I'm sure, later, for the last 7-8 years. And there's a lot of organizations that have innovation teams, right? Teams who are centered on trying to solve really big, wicked problems, trying to create the new X, Y, or Z product that's going to shock the market. But I was never really, the problem I saw with a lot of these teams is kind of the rigor they had was really poor or bad, or innovation didn't mean true innovation. It just meant like optimizing things and little slow changes, or it was a pet project of someone high up in an organization, right? We need to have an innovation team to stand out. And when I talked to the folks here, they didn't have that spirit. You know, they worked outside of a corporate office. They kind of ran more like a startup, you know, and they didn't work on projects that were just trying to improve things throughout the organization. They were really trying to create new market space and had this great sense of freedom that really fit what I was trying to do. So that really intrigued me. And healthcare was something I had a lot of experience in. It wasn't at that point, at least a few months ago, wasn't something that thought I might spend the rest of my career doing. I thought I would love to spend a little bit of time doing this, especially with the idea that what you innovate on impacts a bunch of folks. But it's crazy being through this, being in this pandemic and looking at it through this healthcare lens. And it does a lot of it shifts something inside of you in terms of where you might want to place your energy career wise, because you start immediately seeing some of the dividends of your work because things are moving so fast now and work's
Right.
getting pushed out. And it's kind of a really good feeling, right? To like, man, I'm that one thing I did is impacting somebody's life, or this thing that our team's working on is like having X, Y, or Z impact. And it's to help people, in our community and to improve good in our community. So it's made me think about my position in relation to healthcare. I'm not sure where I've landed on yet, but it's definitely a good thing in terms of my experience so far.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, like you said, you're seeing the results of your labor and really disrupting the industry and the way they've been doing things for so long.
Yeah, man. I mean, my career prior to that was on the consulting side. And I'm sure you're familiar with this, with the consultancy you come across. So one of the bad things about being a consultant is that you don't get as much skin in the game as you would like, right? So it's very easy to say, here's what you guys should do. And then,
Your hands off.
your hands off. And I personally don't really like that, right? Because I like to have that responsibility tied to what I'm doing, but it's really difficult business wise to be able to do that, right? You're not working for the organization that you're consulting on, but you don't get to see a lot of the things that you created, built, and then you don't even get that experience a lot of the times to have that hands-on experience in seeing some of the things that you've recommended come to life. So it was important for me to look at a next stage in my career. It's like, well, I know how to gather recommendations and gather insight, right? I need to be able to build that other muscle around seeing it through, building a product through all the way, or building a service through, or whatever it is, an experience. Because I think that's lacking in my toolbox. So that was part of
Yeah.
the impetus and the move to this new position.
And how long you been doing that new position?
Dude, March, the very end of February. So I
Wow.
got in, I onboarded, and like week 2, we were in quarantine. So I've spent like a handful of time in person with my team, and those other times just being here at home. It's funny because we hired a couple more folks after me, and they haven't even met most of the folks on our team in person. So it's just the
Right.
reality of that new world.
Who knows? Yeah, exactly. Like that might be how it's going to be for definitely a long period of time. So.
Yeah, it's gonna be like that for a minute.
Right. And so you're kind of a new father. How old's Billy now?
Billy just turned 2 in May, so
Yep.
she's 26 months.
Yeah. And how's that
Lots to
working
talk
from
about.
home? And like,
One of the things I thought about was when she was born, and I got to have a couple of weeks off to be with her, to take paternity leave. What was really sad at the end of that was thinking like, oh, I'm never going to have like this much close time with her probably ever again, unless I end up working from home in some capacity. When I just didn't see that to be a reality. So that's been a real blessing to have that much time with her. And we're so close now, and she's probably having the time of her life. She's just around her 2 favorite people, eating fucking goldfish all day long, just watching
yeah.
Sesame Street and doing arts and crafts, being with mom and dad. She's really, really happy. She's not struggling, right? In her mind, she has everything that she needs, and that's
For
quite a
sure.
wonderful perspective to have. And to some degree, like I kind of do as well, right? Like there's that struggle that we've all faced. That's what you shared earlier when this pandemic started up, the kind of fear that was present among everybody, just based on the uncertainty of work, family, what happens if I get sick, etc. And now reeling back, really, I'm sure everybody's had this kind of thinking, or have this thought that I kind of have everything I need. There's a lot of other things I want. Like I would love to have like, a night out with some friends and some wine. And I would love to, be
Go
on a
to a
plane
show.
again. Yeah, go on a show again. But as far as what I need and what's like, going to create that foundation of what happiness is for my life, I got it, man. It's all under here, under this roof. If I lose things, a job or, um, you know, God forbid, I don't think this would happen, but people are losing homes and a lot of things that are valuable for their lives. Would hope I can maintain the perspective that those things you can rebuild, right? They may be really painful to rebuild and take a really long time to rebuild, but you definitely can. But you can't rebuild your family and those crucial elements. So that's been a really wonderful and helpful reminder for me during these times.
True. Yeah, true. Now, is that something like just with that reminder and having that mindset? Is that something that you're kind of like pulling from your childhood at all? Just like that sense of like family and knowing like uh, this is all I need.
That's a good question, man. I think it's definitely pulling from something. It's probably due more to. I'm sure that there's some lesson in there from my parents around gratitude and being satisfied with the things that you have and not wanting too much and just knowing the value of family. There's some of that in there. I think a lot of that also is some of the struggle I've just overcome in my life in terms of being aware of who I am, being able to kind of trying to at least nowhere near it, but master my own self, emotions, and my mind, and then just holding, being in a situation where I can practice having a good perspective on life, right?
I like that you said
And
practicing.
yeah, that's what it is, man. It's all practice, right?
Practice.
Like,
Yep.
so I think it's part of all those things. But in this perspective and I'm sure as you know, man, like I'm just a hyper kind of introspective dude and philosophical dude, and that was my degree. And so the things I strive for in life kind of all have this foundation in terms of let's examine what's going on in your mind. Let's examine what's going on in your heart. Let's examine what's going on in the world. And how do your beliefs match up to that? How do your behaviors match up to that? Where are you feeling your stress, your anxiety, your fear? And is there any truths that you can look to that might help you navigate through that? That might help you put you at ease, and that might actually help you build a better foundation for yourself.
Dude, that's so powerful. It
Thanks, man.
really,
That
it
was my
really is.
first line that I wrote down, so I have about 10 of them that I wrote for the.
Nice, dude. Did you want to get in a little bit about growing up in Long Beach? Because that's a totally different environment of here in Phoenix.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Cool.
Is there anything specific you want to know about growing up in the LBC?
Just your experience about it, like what that was like.
Well, when you are born, they tell you how many degrees of separation you are from Snoop Dogg, so that's cool. It's funny because Long Beach is known for kind of these two things: Snoop Dogg and gangster rap, and Sublime, and in some ways it really embodies that,
A
and in
lot of
other
weed.
ways, and a lot of fucking weed.
Right?
And in other ways it doesn't. I haven't lived there for almost a decade, but it's this interesting city. When I was growing up, it was being mentioned along like as one of like the most diverse cities in the country. We have I believe this is still true. It might not be, but at the time, I think we had like the second highest population of Cambodian population. The first being the capital of Cambodia. So outside of that, we
Wow.
had like these really other high populations of other Asian countries and nationalities. There's a lot of El Salvadorians, which is where my mom's from. So we had all these like niche, smaller nationalities and countries represented in Long Beach. And then growing up, you really saw that in your schools. It's this port city, right? Like it has the Port of LA is one of the biggest ports in the nation. I believe it might even be the biggest one. So growing up, you had a lot of friends whose parents were longshoremen. This is like East Coast Baltimore kind of like work that you think only lives, happened on the East Coast, but there was a lot of that port like blue collar mentality in Long Beach, and then it got really hit hard by some of the economic turmoil in the late 70s and 80s. Times where I wasn't alive to see these, but it just kind of gives you this background of what this city was like. Because it was really this port city, and then the community around it kind of developed to support those longshoremen. And now it's this, second biggest city in LA County. I don't think it's at 1 million population, but it's probably hovering right below that. And growing up there, I think that diversity was part of that. We grew up extremely poor, without many means. But my first home was a garage that we lived in, the garage, my aunt's garage. The next place we lived in wasn't much bigger, it was just like a little apartment. The four of us, my mom and dad and my brother. And but life was kind of like, at least from my eyes, somewhat happy. You learn a lot of humility. You learn not to want things that you don't necessarily need. But you also, one of the things I'm so grateful for is growing up in like maybe then it was obviously not the greatest parts of the city, some of the worst parts. You get to know uh, the streets really well, and that sounds very like cliche, but I don't know how else to put it other than like that's a huge part of my DNA.
For
I'm
sure.
very comfortable in like those environments, very comfortable and like those kind of situations and dynamics. I always said like, and I don't have this luxury now, but I remember being a kid thinking like I should never live more than like 2 or 3 blocks away from like a really good taco stand, right? Like outdoor taco, like that's the kind of like feeling I've always liked is like that busyness and that sense of community. Because you immediately know that the kids you're meeting down the street are probably experiencing that same struggle, right? Like not
True.
getting very many like Christmas gifts, not getting very like any um, birthday gifts. They may be a little bit marginalized in the schools that they're in. And then I was really lucky enough that my core group of friends today all kind of had that same experience. And one thing that I'm super grateful for is having that. I really firmly believe that it created, I think, a positive chip on my shoulder that I was hopefully able to use later in life to leverage things. But getting that exposure and being able to be comfortable in that kind of environment, you can leverage that and learn how to operate in other environments, right? I was later lucky enough to go get a really good higher education, to be interested in a lot of things that a lot of the kids I grew up weren't interested in. And that allowed me the opportunity to also be able to interact in other situations with people from other socioeconomical backgrounds. And so having those, like, to this day, I can walk down those streets where I grew up and still have a conversation about hip hop, throwing up tags,
Yeah.
like what have you. And I'm so blessed to have that perspective. One of the things as a parent that you look at, and not that you won't want your child to like suffer through something like that, right? But they don't get to have that experience. Like they're going to grow up, without some of those things that might sharpen them in a specific way. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it just makes you realize, they're going to have a very different world. Um, I have to be very thoughtful about how they don't take things for granted, how they're still comfortable in maybe some situations they didn't grow up in, right? Because
Mhm.
and allow them to see people from a certain perspective, right? To have a kind of humility and equality towards how they view the world, not judge others. And there's just a lot of what that experience brings. And one of the things as a parent is I think those are strengths, and it's hard to kind of pull that from inside of you and dial it into your child. So they're going to have far different strengths than me, right? So we'll see
Yeah.
how that pans out.
And I think like you'll be able to teach like the things that you learned, or not even learned, there's things that you gained from those experiences and like how those things have like shaped you. That's something you'll be able to teach to your kids. You know,
Absolutely,
they're not gonna be able to live it the way that you did, but the things that you learned from that and that you got out of it are things that you can be able to distill in them and just make them better human beings.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. Absolutely, yeah. Man. So that was life in Long Beach.
Yeah. And then it was on to Phoenix then, huh?
Well, I lived around LA a little bit while I was going to school and after school, but Long Beach is still my home, and I never veered too far from that nest.
You went to UCLA?
Then I moved. Yeah, I went to UCLA, studied philosophy. Dude, it's funny because out of high school, I barely graduated high school. This is how much of like an idiot I was. I think my GPA from high school was literally like a 1.54 or something like that. I was a horrible student, and I wasn't those like, I'm just bored because I'm actually really smart. I was literally that dumb. My math skills were like at a freshman level. My reading and writing skills were like at an 8th grade level. There's a lot I can say about the educational system in terms of how I was able to like glide on by with that. But
yeah.
I only graduated, I think, because I went to summer school every year in high school. And I got into like drama and film my senior year, and I got really good grades there. But the core of my education was horrible, man. I remember my first year of college, I was at a community college, Long Beach City College. Took a, you have to do like your entry exams so they can place you in the right level math and English and all that. So it took like a English and math, and like my English entrance was right above the ESL classes. It was like, here were the ESL classes, and then here was like the next English. It was like high school English or something like that. It was really bad. And then my math was like, I don't even know, like basic geometry. It was just horrible. So I was a really bad student, and that didn't start off, that didn't help me in college too, because the first 2 or 3 years I was in college, I don't think I got anything higher than a C. And if I got a C, that was rare. I was like on academic probation basically from the moment I started. And somehow, by some miracle, I lightened up and got to UCLA. And there's a big story there about that. But I, not that I hate it, I love being at school. Like school was fucking
I was just
fun,
gonna ask,
dude.
yeah, did you hate it or no?
I love being at school, man. Like I loved hanging with my friends. We ditched, did a lot of drugs, drank a lot. Like I was fun as fuck. I just didn't, this is no knock on my parents at all, but my mom is an immigrant. My dad is an immigrant. And their educational background wasn't one to really be aware of what education can provide you here in this country. And to them, and I wasn't a bad kid, I didn't make trouble in class, and I wasn't like, I didn't get in fights. It was just kind of like a goof. And it just didn't really care. But in their mind, I think part of it was, as long as he's not in gangs and we're not getting like letters about how, disruptive he is, and maybe his grades kind of suck, but like, it wasn't too big of a worry. So there wasn't really any like motivation. And I certainly didn't have that intrinsically. I had work ethic in a very different way.
And where you talking about your work ethic there? Where'd you get that from?
Oh, from my parents.
Gotcha.
They're
okay.
Latin American, man. They're Latin American. I had zero work ethic for school, but a lot of work ethic in today for like work, right? Like my parents are both small business owners. My mom's still a small business owner. My dad owned a bunch of like mechanic shops growing up, and was always trying to like start his own businesses. I grew up basically in his tire shop. Every day after school, we'd go and like clean his tools, like mop the floors, like help with his, rebuilding an engine. Or our backyard was like a typical like Hispanic family's backyard. There was like 20 cars back there that were all in some form of being built or rebuilt, or fixed. We had a 64 and a half Mustang back there though. That was kind of cool.
Whoa.
Yeah, man. He rebuilt that from the ground up pretty much and sold it at one point. We had this cool, which I to this day now want to buy one, but he had this old, I think it was like an 80, maybe 78 or 82 Datsun. It was really boxy, kind of, they would race them in the streets because they were super fucking light. So he was like just a mechanic, like a lot of other Mexican immigrants were. Really worked hard at starting his own business. My mom was a real estate agent. She still is, still has her own business. They both busted their ass, man. And I'm the same way when it comes to work. Like, I love the hustle. You know, I that's part of, I think, you know, in a very general way, what the immigrants at that point, and probably since then as well, have really given to maybe my generation, because I see that in all my friends. It's a core group of friends who all grew up very similarly. First generation parents are from Mexico or Central America. All hard workers. So that description I gave you of how I grew up, that's like times 8 with like my other friends, all horrible students. And yet now today, we've all managed some degree of success. I'm probably the least successful of them. Some of them are like, you know, creative directors of really big agencies in LA, lawyers, like they're owning their own businesses. We just kind of brightened up and lightened up. But I do think a big part of it is one of the things that unites us is kind of that work ethic and that mentality towards business and working within business. Because there's just a lot with experience in that, you know, the appreciation that goes into like a hard day's earned money, right? The value of money, the value of being able to have your own business, see it succeed or failure. One thing I always tell folks that I'm really, really thankful and grateful that I get an opportunity to kind of guest speak on like some classes at ASU or do other forms of conversations like this with students, as I'm like critiquing portfolios or just people that reach out to me. And one of the pieces of advice that I always give students is, especially within the design community, is you should learn how to sell something, like start a business. You know, I hate using this term because I don't mean to be political at all, but it sounds like it's coming through the mouth of our idiotic president, make a deal. But I don't know how else to say it. Like the value of like, can you make something, you know, and get somebody else to buy it from you? And if you can, like the kind of, for me at least, the kind of respect and appreciation you would have walking into like my organization saying, hey, I built this, you know, people bought it or people didn't buy it, but here's what I learned. I think that gives a leg up to you as a designer coming up or as a researcher or design thinker, to just have that skill, to know what it's like to get punched in the mouth by the market, react to it, or to know what it's like to have success, right?
Yeah. Well, and also just going through those hard times, you know, and all those lessons, all those failures, right? I guess, like, you know, if you're doing your own thing, and like you said, I think it's a great piece of advice. So props to you for, like, you know, when you're doing portfolio reviews or giving any speaking things, is talking about that, because there's so much you learn about yourself, and how you can connect with other people too, like through that. So that's huge. That's awesome.
Dude, you're probably seeing this a little bit, you know, as a creative director and somebody that's at the top level of this hierarchy. And you tell me if I'm wrong, man, but like, you know, some of the salary demands I've heard from some of the younger generation, like the very young generation, is like, what, dude? You know, so to me, having that experience is just like brings some humility and
for sure.
And I'm in no way saying somebody is or isn't worth what they're asking for. There's a big part of like, hey, you should also learn how to negotiate and know your value as well. But paired with some of the background and the things they have to say is just very disproportionate. And
for sure. Oh man, that's such a good. I've had so many experiences with that. It's. I'm like, where are you coming from? I mean, especially from people that are just getting out of college, and expecting this stuff. And you learn so much more when you're in the field than you
Yeah,
ever
dude.
would learn when you're in school. So
Absolutely, man.
you have to be in there and do that because the real life situations they don't teach you. And I wish that was something that was definitely applied more in education, especially within like design, advertising, marketing, like any of that kind of stuff is really real life application situations.
Oh yeah. Well, dude, I didn't learn anything of what I'm doing today in school. You
Right?
know, Katie, my wife, she didn't go to school for copywriting. Like almost everybody I know today in this community, it maybe you probably had like some design background with like school, right? But like even then, when it's like technology based stuff in school, and again, maybe this is a little dated. I don't think so from who I'm talking to. You're still behind because they're probably the technology they're using in your class is like, wait a second, like
Yeah.
this is out of date. Why are we learning?
Oh, for
This,
sure.
so just I have my own problems with like higher education and how it should be helping folks out and education in general. Uh, but yeah, that's something I always try to bring up to folks is learn how to. You don't have to go and make your own business, but it would be really valuable for you to understand what that's like a little bit.
Because you learn all the different facets of what it takes to run a business, um, and you have a much better appreciation for all those different parts that go into it. And later on, when you're working at a company, you'll understand all those different areas. I mean, it could be even just sending out an estimate or doing proposals or billing with clients, like any of that kind of stuff. You're gonna get that, and you're gonna learn real quick.
Yeah, dude, it's that, and then it's also probably something that I didn't foresee as much, and I don't know if you foresaw a lot, but design today is much more of, or is becoming much more business oriented, right? So as a designer, you don't just have to, a visual designer, understand the visual components, but business goals, right? How this is impacting like larger initiatives and operations with the organizations. You're having to have conversations with people that may not even be on the creative end of the business you're working with, right? So you have to understand where they're
Absolutely.
coming from, and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. The only time you don't have to do that is if you're just a straight up visual art, just an artist, right? You're in a
Right.
paint, and that's a
Right.
whole different segment. Like, I mean, you still got to learn how to sell because you got to sell yourself and you got to sell your art. But for that part, I mean, it's your vision and the message that you want to get out with your art. But anything else outside of that, no, it's not going to happen. So
Yeah, man.
it's so, dude. Let's get into that monumental kind of struggle within your journey.
The monumental point of struggle. I thought about this a little bit in the last couple of days, and there's certainly some points I could point to in my life about immense struggle. But what I kept coming back to, Matt, was for me, all struggle is related to some sort of struggle one has with trying to become more self-aware. And so every struggle I've ever had in my life has been some variation of me struggling with self-awareness or a lack of self-awareness, whether it was deciding to get my act together and be a good student, whether it was deciding to like move to Phoenix, to convert to Buddhism, the struggle now of trying to be an all-time great dad. That to me is probably like the the pinnacle of the things I want to do in my life. If I can end my life with my child having really great parents and a wonderful upbringing, that's greater than anything else I could ever do. But to me, all those things kind of all come back to self-awareness. So how are you as an individual trying to become more trying to have a greater set of understanding as to why you do the things that you do, why you feel the things that you feel, and then why seemingly has your life gone the way it has, and why have you had these sorts of tragedies in your life, or these sorts of mental afflictions or obstacles that might seem like they're coming from the outside, but so much of how we react to them and they turn into pivotal moments in our lives is the way we've reacted to them. And so to me, the struggle's always been with what's going on in my head and how to try and master that, how to become, lack of a better term, more aware of what's going on in there. And it's really shifted and changed throughout every phase of my life. I converted to Buddhism because I just believed that it was going to help me get there. My career is in consumer insights. I mean, I'm in innovation, and I like to think of myself kind of as a human-centered designer. But really, the core and what I really get pumped about is kind of consumer insights. Is finding out why people do the things that they do, why they buy shit that they buy, and how that relates to who they are as an individual. Because I can use that information, I can use that intelligence to go build a better experience, build a brand new product, go do X, Y, and Z. But it's funny, right? Like the professions that you're in speak so much as to who you are inside as a reflection of that. And going through my life as a consumer researcher, where I spend an inordinate amount of time talking to people just about like why they do the things that they do, from choosing a healthcare provider to, why they eat at certain Chinese food restaurants, to why they buy cream cheese, to why they buy pet food, to like everything under the sun. I've had the experience of doing some pretty cool stuff. And it's all been really helpful stuff for me to learn a little bit more about myself. Because that's kind of my ultimate goal in game there, is to be more enlightened, to have a greater sense of transparency within who I am. So my struggle has always been that is
Mm-hmm.
that marker, that goalpost keeps moving further and further away. But it's that self-awareness piece, and only because it's just going to give me the keys to kind of live through the kind of life that I feel like I want to have, and then make things like what we're experiencing now, hopefully try to turn that into something positive or useful or helpful, or manage it and navigate it through some kind of like sanity. So there's a lot of different moments where that comes up, and I struggle to kind of think of one that really encapsulated it. And it's not one, but it's just a series of how that has evolved in my life.
Yeah, usually it is, right? It's those things in your life that become transformative,
Yeah, dude, absolutely,
right?
man.
And that's huge. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, sometimes it's not like a monumental part, but it's all these different things that have like led up to that.
Yeah,
And it makes you who you are today.
Absolutely. One thing I can speak to converting to Buddhism, because my practice has kind of suffered lately. I haven't practiced in a certain kind of way as I like to in the past, but I'm practicing in a very different way. But one of the things that, and why I find this unique, is because I kind of find this concept contrary to maybe what others in my demographic might think, or contrary to what like a postmodern way of looking at the world might be. So back in 2010, started exploring a lot of what Buddhism was. And a lot of people convert to religion. I know this because I've done work on religion, and why people switch to different religions, or decide to adopt a religion or abandon a religion.
Right.
A lot of people switch because of something's happened in their life, something traumatic, and they need to transform, right? Whether it's they're encountering some heavy form of addiction, or they've encountered some really horrible family like something massive has happened in their life, and they want to transform. I really didn't have that in my case. It was a lot more subtle, but in some way, it was always kind of the thing I was always thinking about. I studied philosophy. That was my degree, and I thought I was just going to teach existentialism for a very long time. That didn't end up happening, probably for a good reason. um, but I was always kind of plagued and obsessed with these very existential questions. What's the meaning of life? What does it mean to live a good life? How do you do that? Why is it that I kind of suffer in the way I do? And one of the things I think I realized, it's a very popular belief, say a postmodern belief, to believe that there's a lot of different ways to view the world. And each of those ways is correct. And I don't dismiss that or feel like that's not true. But I think it's very difficult to go through a transformation in your life and change without without following a very rigid kind of path. And what I mean by that is, you know, something had been bothering me for a very long time about the fact that, like, I've always, something that I think is present within our generation, we're kind of plagued with this notion of a better version of ourselves, right? There's always kind of like this version of ourselves that's a little bit more happier, a little bit more X, Y, or Z, a little bit more content with their surroundings, this, you know, more Zen-like individual that I imagine myself to be, and they're just kind of out of our reach. And that always bothered me, that I never seemed to make any progress on that. One of the reasons I got into philosophy was I was hoping that the things I would learn there, I could think my way through being a better person. And certainly reading things like philosophy, moral philosophy, and existentialism help. But to me, I found it incredibly, at some point now, just egotistical to think that I could do that on myself. For me, at least, that was my experience. Others may have something different. But you know, one of the things that there's this Jungian idea of transformation, and so, and it's very similar to like any kind of addiction program, where the very first steps is you admit that, hey, there's something wrong with me. I want to be better, and there is a way for me to be a better individual. But along that way, you kind of have to make a commitment to like a higher order thing, whether that's religious, whether that's not religious, but it could be like a set of principles, right? There's something outside of you that needs to guide how you're going to behave, because you're kind of admitting that whatever was guiding you to behave in a certain way just wasn't working, right? And then to do that really proper takes an incredible amount of discipline, because what you're asking yourself to do is let go of a certain kind of freedom that you have. We think we're free, so I'm going to just go and do whatever I want. And that's what freedom is. But one way you can say is, well, you're not really free. You're just a slave to like an addiction or a behavior or a pattern or an emotion, and it's left you with a kind of life that you're not super happy about, or that you always think about wanting better. So how is that free? And how's that freedom made you happy? There's that great line from the movie No Country for Old Men, where he's in the gas station, he's like flipping the coin, and he talks to like the gas station attendant. And he's like, you know, if the rule that you followed in life got you to this point, of what use was that rule? And that's always really beautiful, because he's saying like the things that you followed aren't giving you the kind of life where you like are ultimately excited and thrilled about and happy. Then why would you? Then you need another pair of rules, right? And why that's, I think, contrary to maybe our generation, is to connect yourself with something higher order almost automatically means that you're seemingly giving up on some kind of freedom, right? That you're now embracing some kind of discipline and you're limiting who you are. And that's kind of contrary to the spirit of kind of today, right? That we can do what we want and the things that we want. But with that is the danger that you may never get to a point of self-reflection and introspection where you're really questioning how happy you are in life. And if you want a happier life and a better life, you have to kind of sacrifice, right? You have to give something up, attach yourself to something higher order, because your order wasn't working, right? So you have to follow another set of rules and then do that very strictly. That's one of the reasons when I first got into Buddhism for a short period of time there, I really thought about maybe like being a monk. That's like the ultimate version of that, right? Like you have like super discipline. Your life is very simple, but you're disciplined in the effort that you're really buying into this idea that I can't get there myself. I have to seek some other wisdom to help me lead me there. And that to me was just incredibly appealing because I intuitively saw for me how that was going to work for me and how I just didn't have the tools to like think myself to like a kind of liberation or enlightenment or to will myself to like the kind of individual I wanted to be. I needed a path. And that path can come in like a lot of forms for people. But I think from who I've talked to that in my life that I've undergone like same kinds of transformations and changed who they are as an individual in a really dramatic way, in a purposeful way, it always seems to have that kind of dynamic. That's part of the ingredients, right? You have to like kind of follow something, sacrifice a little bit of who you are or a lot of who you are, and get in line to introduce a different kind of discipline in your life.
Yeah, and I think people are very resistant to that change of behavior. Just
Yeah.
it's just being who we are. It's not an easy thing, and you get stuck in the way that you are. And it's for people to change something like that, it's a challenge. And like you said, having something to guide you is definitely the way that someone can actually follow through with that. It's very hard, I think, to just do it on your own without any other guidance.
Well, all those behaviors we do to even like, the more minor behaviors of just something like I'm trying to think of something like we're probably all really guilty of. I definitely am guilty of, but I don't know. I don't know how much to, yeah, social media, right? So like probably the hour I spend a day, that's just a waste of scrolling and thumb exercising, right? But that pattern, your body, your mind does this like beautiful, wonderful thing that just probably in an effort to kind of like, hey, I'm going to create a little bubble for you because I know you're dumbass isn't ready to like see the world and question yourself, right? And like face all these things of reality. So I'm going to keep you zoned in onto like this Instagram feed and this Twitter feed or whatever because you just, dude, you ain't ready, right? So in one brilliant way, like it's kind of trying to protect you, right? But in the only way it can, and we just a large part of our day can be just a lot of those behaviors like on infinite loop over and over again. And to even have like a glimmer of another thing they should teach in schools is how to think critically, right? How to be introspective and how to question like, hey, can my life be a little bit better? Why is it that I kind of seem to like get pissed off at the same sorts of things over and over again? Why is it that I've lived like 38 years on this earth and this one kind of comment always like ticks me off? I should be able to like deal with something that simple, right? All these little opportunities to kind of enact this change, and we're mind's so good at like not letting us do that. It's to your point, it's really hard. It's really difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Well, dude, what things would you? I know you talked about like the inspiration towards like younger designers and that sort of thing. But is there any other advice that you would give to like your younger self? Like if you were able to go back in time and talk to young Sal.
Yeah, dude, I don't think we have enough time to cover all the things. This is one of the things that I've done throughout my life and throughout the last part of my life is kind of the last thing you want to do in your life is die with any kind of regret, right? That must be like a horrible experience to have, is to sit on your deathbed and look back and just kind of beat yourself up for all the things that you didn't get to do. And then you look back and you're like, you should have just done that. So I would tell my younger self, one of the things was, as I shared, I got out of high school. I spent 3 years in community college just being a fucking loser, really. I don't want to be that harsh on myself. I had a lot of fun. I was in a band. I was going out a lot. Had some great experiences with friends. There's a lot of socially that I
Yeah.
accomplished, but at a really, really high cost. I think I could have dialed back a lot and learned more of a balance. So the third year of my community college, I was about ready to like drop out because my grades just sucked. I took a philosophy class, my first philosophy class ever. And we learned in class one, day one, from this gentleman named Dr. Cragen, who I later became really, really good friends with. And he's a big mentor of mine and person that I look back to as somebody who had a significant amount of influence in my life. He taught like Plato's allegory of the cave in a very quick way. It's the story behind the allegory of the cave is you live your whole life in the cave, and what you're viewing is shadow puppets in front of you as a representation of the world. And one day somebody frees you from this puppet show and you go outside and you see the real world, the real trees and all this. And it's basically the Matrix. Right? As I'm listening to this, I'm like 21 years old or something, my jaw just drops. I just think this is like the coolest thing I've ever fucking heard. And my best friend took this class, and best friend to this day, Rob was in there, and we were just like, whoa, this guy's fucking awesome. This old Harvard educated guy, a genius really, teaching at a community college of philosophy. And I aced that class. I did really, really well. It was so interested in that. And I didn't even realize it got towards the end of the semester, and I was like, holy fuck, like I got an A. And I was like, how do I learn more of this? I was like, I think I have to get an education. So I spent the next 2 years retaking all the classes I had failed in 3 years. I did take summer school. At that point in my life, I don't think I ever read more than like 1 or 2 books, maybe 3 books. I spent like 2 summers, shit you not, like morning to night in our school library, like reading. Like I was devouring books, like 2 or 3 books a week, dude. And just like catching up, like I had been tapped into a whole world of thinking, right? From philosophy to like anthropology to these really great and grand concepts. Then I fell in love with books at that point. And so I retook all my classes. I aced all my classes. I got in the honor roll of our community college, if you can believe that. Applied to UCLA, got in, and then studied philosophy there because I thought I wanted to teach what I loved and what got me interested into being intellectual to any degree. But didn't go that route. But that moment, I apologize why I even went on that tangent.
No, it's all good. No apologies.
But and I'm sure it was part of the point I'm trying to make now. But it's, to me, that's always like just like a very like good example as to that introspective moment, a moment when the world can like shock you a little bit or make you fall in love with something. And that point, it was intelligence and reading and books and ideas and concepts. And smart enough to be able to capitalize. Yeah, dude.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That was it. That's awesome. Yeah, that was your inspiration right there. That was definitely a huge turning point.
Oh, so now I know why I brought that point up, because you said, what do I tell my younger self? So I would tell my younger self is like, look, I know you don't think that like higher education and those things are in your card, but like they definitely are. So if you really wanted to, you can get into like a school, or even, I wouldn't even say a school at this point, because my views on whether or not you need a higher education have changed. But you can apply yourself to like whatever it is you want to do and do it right now. I would have told myself that at like 16, 17, 18 years old. It's like, get through high school and there's this whole world. At the same time, I was like traveling abroad for the first time. That had a huge impact. I think I just would have tried to inspire myself as to like all the things that I know I would have been inspired by later on. That those things came much later in my life. probably because I just didn't have anybody in my life that had those experiences that I was close to that can be like, you can travel abroad, or this is what's great about like, you know, being really interested in these subjects, or this is what's great about whatever. So I would have really just tried to inspire myself. And I think I would know the right things to say to myself at certain points in life that would have changed me. But I don't, I wouldn't ever want to say I wasted parts of my life. I don't think that, but I could have had a lot more balance. And seeing where I would have, if I would have been interested in those things much earlier in my life, I'm just super hyper interested in terms of what kind of life I would have ended up living, right? So I would just try to simply inspire myself. And then to the younger folks, the designers out there, man, like, dude, it's a cliche and you probably feel this way, but like, you have all the time in the world. Like, you really do have all the time in the world. You should act like you know, and that doesn't mean you should be slow, but don't hurry trying to get to some place and feel like it's an ending, right? You should be hurrying to try as many things as possible. Because you really,
Yeah.
I'm at the age now, dude, where I feel like, dude, I can start from ground zero, right? Like, that's how much time I feel like I have.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And I think it's you have to try different things because you never know. Coming back to like your experience, if you don't try, you're not going to know what situation is going to inspire you, or what something there is going to like, fuel that fire for you.
Yeah, dude.
Try everything.
What do you tell like the designers coming up, man? Because you represent somebody who's like a cornerstone within our design community. I'm sure hundreds of people talk to you about design and what to do. Like, what's your perspective on that?
I like pretty much a lot of that is, really try to do a lot of different things. Like I know everyone like talks about being a master of something, and I think that's good and that's important, but I think it's really important to be well-rounded because there's all those different disciplines that you can help to grow yourself to be better at whatever you're going to do. And you'll use those elements. And I look back now, with my life, and I've had all these different jobs within like the design industry or the creative industry, right? And all of those like have led me to where I am today. And I wouldn't be where I am today unless I had all those little elements or all those different type of creative jobs to do what I do. And so that's why, always be open to opportunities, and always be learning like new things all the time. There's been times where, I've gone into working on something and they're like, oh, can you do this? And I've never done it before. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And I'll, bust my ass and learn how to do that, and you just figure it out. Another thing that I tell a lot of people is, spend a lot of time creating for yourself, your own projects, whatever that may be. You have to show the type of work that you want to do, and the type of work that inspires you.
So I think that's super, super helpful. Somebody told me a long time ago that if you're ever interested in learning a new skill, you should try to learn it through the lens of like something that you're interested in. So they're like, look, if you want to learn a new language, like go buy like The Walking Dead in Spanish and try to read it, right? Because it will hold, like, don't go read like, I don't know, Tale of Two Cities. Like it's going to bore you to death, right? Or if you want to be like an artist, like go recreate your favorite, attach it to something, to your point, like your own creative endeavors that will keep those juices flowing and inspire you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then you'll be amazed at what you can take from that. So any other closing things or anything else that you wanted to touch on before we wrap up, dude?
What I really struggle is a word that I use a lot in my career and in my job, because we often say from a consumer insights point of view is the insight comes from, there's a really good researcher in our field, his name's Bob Moesta, and he has this quote that says, you should look at where people struggle to do something, and that's going to give you the insight for your product or service, right? So this, I'm sure. But for me, it's really interesting to apply that to your own life in the most minute ways and things that don't seemingly feel like struggles. Like, dude, it's sometimes really hard to pull away from a mad Twitter feed moment, right? Like
Right,
that's a
yeah.
struggle, right? And I just find those moments fascinating because those are really like wonderful opportunities to have a good opportunity to have a good conversation with yourself and to learn a little bit about yourself. So
Yeah.
dude, this was fun, man. I can keep talking
Cool.
about this kind of subject for a minute. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. Really
Dude, this
honored.
was really, really fun. I like that you really went deep with it. I think it was really important. So it was
It's
cool.
the
It was
only
really
way I know how to roll, man.
yeah, definitely. Well, if anyone wants to connect with you at all, are you down for sharing any of your information, anything on like social or LinkedIn or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you want to see a bunch of pictures of my daughter and wines I drink, go to my Instagram, Sally Bravo or at Sally Bravo. And then if you want to hear me explode with rage often, you can go to my Twitter feed that has like 4 followers because I'm probably that annoying on there. Um, I believe it's also at Sally Bravo.
Cool. Yeah, Billy is adorable, by the way. So it's
Yeah, man.
really crazy seeing her grow. From being there, from seeing her when she was first born to how big she is today is a trip. Now that my daughter's 12, gonna be
Oh
13.
my goodness, she's 12 already.
Yeah, and
Wow.
so it's just it's like when I see Billy, it takes me back to that time when Audrey was 2, and just their crazy style, just their presence, their personalities, and yeah, dude, they're not. I know it's so cliche because everyone's like, oh yeah, it goes by really fast, and when you're a parent, and they're not fucking around, dude. It really, really is. Like I look back at certain parts of my life and where I know where things happen, or like, oh well, Audrey was this age when this happened, or like that's kind of how I look back and like understand my timeline of my life now is those different stages in her life.
Yeah, man, you kind of pin those pivotal moments to them and to all the changes that they're having. It's crazy, and I don't know if you have this, but with my phone, I think I have every picture going back to like 2013 or something like that, right? So when you click on your camera roll, it's just a crazy time traveling machine, man.
Yeah,
Like you
oh, that's
point out like,
right.
oh, that summer or that summer, something that until 10 years ago we really didn't have as a society, like that access to like those memories just like that. And you're exactly right. I'm looking through this, I'm like, oh, that was her first step, or oh, that was the day, remember when she got to eat bacon for the first time, or
Right,
and they're
yeah,
all
for
right
sure.
there. And it's a crazy experience to go through that camera roll with a family and with a child, um, because there's nothing quite like that.
Right. I mean, we had printed photographs when we were kids, but it's not. It was very few, and they get lost and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully, people are backing their phones up on the cloud and shit like that, so they don't lose it. Because
I
years
know,
later
man.
on, you're gonna want to look back at it. So, well, dude, thanks again, man. This was awesome. Really appreciate your time and connecting with me, dude.
Absolutely, man. I had a blast.